And occasionally we'd have a song where Barry would do the first verse, I would do the second verse, and what felt comfortable.
I'm just a BG on my own at the moment.
What would you be, Robin? I'm guessing you're going to be an introvert then, yeah?
Not because of what he says, I should agree, because a lot of artists are introverts.
This gets me, you don't talk at all, really?
Not really, no, I wait for the gaps.
You wait for the gaps and you go, no.
To be a BG, you find that you're on your own sometimes.
He didn't raise his voice. He didn't give advice. He didn't even stay very long. But when Freddie Mercury finished speaking, Robin Gibb didn't respond right away. He just stood there, silent, holding on to words he wouldn't repeat for years. If you care about the real stories behind the music, subscribe to RetroWaves. This channel is built for that. And then the moment passed. Or at least, that's how it looked from the outside. Robin Gibb spent most of his life surrounded by people, crowds, audiences, family. Yet somehow he often felt unseen, not ignored, but misunderstood. And that feeling followed him everywhere, even when the Bee Gees were untouchable, even when the songs were everywhere, even when the applause never stopped. Because within the group, Robin wasn't the loudest voice. He wasn't the leader. He wasn't the one who filled the room before speaking. That role belonged to someone else. And Robin learned early that survival sometimes meant becoming smaller, not disappearing, just quieter. Freddie Mercury was the opposite. He didn't shrink, he expanded. He filled every space he entered, not by force, but by presence. Where Robin folded inward, Freddie pushed outward. Where Robin doubted, Freddie declared. At least, that's how it appeared, but appearances, as both men knew, were carefully constructed things. And when they crossed paths, away from the lights, away from the press, something unexpected happened. Freddie didn't perform, he observed. The two men moved through the same world, but rarely collided publicly. Industry dinners, private gatherings, moments that never made headlines. And yet, those who were there noticed something subtle. Freddie listened to Robin differently, not as a rival, not as a curiosity, but as someone who recognized a familiar tension, the strain of carrying a voice that didn't always feel safe to use. Robin's voice had always been described as fragile, high, emotional, unprotected. Critics loved it, until they didn't. And when trends shifted, when louder sounds took over, that same voice became a liability in the eyes of the industry. Robin felt that shift deeply, not because he lacked confidence in his talent, but because he had been taught over time that sensitivity came with a cost. Freddie knew that cost. He just paid it differently. Behind the confidence, behind the theatrical certainty, Freddie understood what it meant to be watched, judged, and categorized. He knew what it felt like to be reduced to a single trait and punished for it. So when he looked at Robin, he didn't see weakness, he saw restraint. And that distinction mattered more than anyone realized at the time. There was no announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just a moment, quiet enough that most people missed it. But Robin didn't, because what Freddie said didn't challenge him. It unsettled him, and not in a way that demanded immediate action. It lingered. Years later, Robin would still circle back to that moment in his own mind, not by repeating the words, but by returning to the feeling. That strange mix of validation and discomfort, as if someone had finally named something Robin had been avoiding. What made it complicated was timing. Robin was already carrying doubts about his place, about his voice, about whether there was still room for him in a changing musical world. And then Freddie said something that didn't fit the narrative Robin had been telling himself, something that contradicted years of quiet self-editing. But Robin didn't push back, he didn't argue, he didn't ask questions, because part of him already knew Freddie wasn't wrong. And that realization, more than the words themselves, was what stayed with him. What makes this moment easy to misunderstand is what it wasn't. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a confession, it wasn't advice about fame or success. It didn't come with urgency, which is precisely why it worked. Because when someone like Freddie Mercury speaks softly, you listen differently. And Robin did. even though acknowledging what Freddie saw meant confronting something Robin had spent years managing quietly. The truth that his voice, the very thing that made him vulnerable, was also the thing he had been trying to protect himself from. After that conversation, nothing visibly changed. The Bee Gees continued. The music continued. The public story stayed intact. But internally, something had shifted. Not enough to announce, not enough to explain, just enough to disturb the balance Robin had relied on. He became more aware of when he held back, more conscious of when he softened himself for the sake of harmony, and more aware of the cost of doing so. But he didn't act on it immediately, because recognizing a truth and accepting it are two very different things. Freddie didn't follow up, didn't check in, didn't reinforce the message. He didn't need to. He had already done the harder thing. He had seen Robin clearly and said so. What happened next didn't unfold quickly. In fact, it unfolded so slowly that many people never noticed it happening at all. But the seed had been planted, and over time it would resurface, not as rebellion, not as confrontation, but as a quiet reckoning. Robin would later be described as reflective, private, introspective. But those traits had always been there. The difference was that now he understood they weren't something to apologize for, even if he wasn't ready to fully embrace them yet. The hardest part wasn't changing. It was realizing how long he had been trying not to. And the words Freddie spoke, the ones Robin never quoted, never dramatized, never turned into a story, sat there, waiting for the moment when Robin would finally stop shrinking himself. That moment hadn't arrived yet, but it was closer than he realized. The change didn't announce itself. There was no moment where Robin Gibb decided to be different. No declaration, no turning point the public could point to. It arrived gradually, almost invisibly, in the way he chose to sing and sometimes in the way he chose not to. Robin began trusting stillness more, letting pauses breathe, allowing emotion to sit unresolved instead of smoothing it out for comfort. It wasn't defiance, it was permission. And that permission traced back to something Freddie Mercury had said, not as instruction, but as recognition. What Freddie saw that day wasn't a man who lacked confidence. It was a man who had learned to dilute himself to survive closeness, to avoid conflict, to preserve balance. Robin had spent years softening his edges because the music demanded unity and the family required compromise. But Freddie understood something Robin had avoided naming. That restraint, repeated long enough, becomes erasure. Freddie didn't warn Robin about the world. He warned him about silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that slowly convinces you your voice is safer when it's smaller. That realization didn't free Robin immediately. In some ways, it made things harder, because once you recognize self-erasure, you can no longer unsee it. And Robin began noticing every time he stepped back automatically, every time he yielded without being asked, every time his instinct was to disappear so others could feel more comfortable. Years passed, losses accumulated, the world changed. And one by one, the people who had shaped Robin's inner world were gone, including Freddie. Freddie Mercury never lived to see what his words became inside Robin. He never knew how often Robin revisited that moment, how often he wondered if Freddie had recognized something even Robin himself hadn't fully accepted yet. Because after Freddie's death, the absence hit differently, not as shock, as quiet. The same quiet Freddie had once warned him about. And that was when the meaning finally surfaced. Freddie hadn't been telling Robin to become louder. He had been telling him not to vanish. As Robin grew older, his relationship with legacy changed. He stopped measuring success by dominance, stopped competing for space, stopped explaining himself. Instead, he leaned into the very quality that once made him feel exposed. Emotion without armor. Listeners noticed it before Robin ever acknowledged it publicly. The way his performances felt more vulnerable, more present, less guarded. There was no attempt to reclaim youth, no effort to outshine, just honesty. sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes fragile, but unmistakably his. When Robin spoke about identity later in life, his words were careful, measured, never dramatic. But there was a shift in how he described himself. Less apology, more acceptance, as if he had finally stopped defending the parts of himself that didn't fit the traditional image of strength. And in quiet moments, away from cameras, he admitted something to those close to him. Not as a story, not as a revelation, but as a truth that had taken years to surface. That someone once saw him clearly, before he knew how to do it himself. Freddie's words were never about instruction. They were about permission. Permission to remain intact in a world that rewards noise. Permission to exist without needing to dominate. Permission to stop shrinking. Robin never repeated the sentence, perhaps because repeating it would reduce it, turn it into a quote instead of a moment. Instead, he carried it. Let it settle. Let it change him slowly. By the end of his life, Robin Gibb was no longer trying to be understood by everyone. He no longer needed to prove the value of softness. He had lived long enough to know that sensitivity doesn't disappear when ignored. It deepens. The irony is that Freddie Mercury, the loudest presence in the room, was the one who recognized that truth first. Not because he wanted Robin to become like him, but because he understood what it meant to survive as yourself. And so the moment remains unrecorded, unquoted, unverified by tape or transcript. But its impact is written quietly across the rest of Robin Gibb's life, in the way he sang, in the way he stood, in the way he finally allowed himself to take up space, not loudly, but fully. Some truths don't arrive with spectacle, they arrive with recognition, and once seen, they never leave you. Freddie Mercury didn't change Robin Gibb by speaking loudly, he changed him by seeing him. And sometimes, that's enough.